All right, we are now streaming. So can I have all the advocates and all the witnesses please raise your right hand? And please indicate by saying "I do" if you swear to abide by the rules of this proceeding and conduct yourself in a manner that is honorable to this forum.
I do.
I do.
Now calling the case number 082263, Cam Donaldson versus Karen Basia. We will start with the plaintiff. Are there any housekeeping matters?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Summer Combs.
My name is Brandon Urabor, and we're here on behalf of the plaintiff, Cam Donaldson, who is representing the estate of his father, Lou Donaldson.
And we do have two procedural matters and just one substantive motion today.
Okay, let's start with the procedural ones first, please.
Your Honor, since we are virtual today and there are scoring judges and jurors that are observing, may we assume that all arguments are constructively outside the presence of the jury?
Yes.
Okay. And also, I wanted to draw the court's attention to the fact that because, again, we are virtual and we, as all of the counsels here, we agreed pre-trial that we will be turning off our cameras during opening statements so that the only speaking counsel will be on screen. And I also wanted to mention that I personally will be shifting into the courtroom after we call our second witness because we all have to be in separate rooms. And I wanted to inform the court that I'll be asking just for a few moments to do so there will be no confusion when I do that.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. And then we are ready to proceed with our substantive motions.
All right, let's get any procedural motions from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Tia Reed, and joining me in today's trial will be my co-counsel, Mr. Dante Esposito.
Good evening, Your Honor.
We'll be representing the defendant, Ms. Karen Basia, in this case today. We do have one stipulation we'd like to make you aware of, and as well as two motions we're happy to present to the court when you're ready, Your Honor.
Okay. Before I do that, what is the team name for the plaintiff?
Your Honor, that's La Plata Peak.
Okay. And for the defense?
Mount Elbert, Your Honor.
Okay. So let's do substantive motions from the plaintiff and then substantive motions from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, we asked the court to pre-admit a temporary restraining order request that Lou Donaldson, the decedent in this case, submitted against the defendant, Karen Basia. Per Federal Rules of Evidence 803-8A3, this request constitutes a public record as it is a factual finding from legally authorized investigation.
And defense?
Your Honor, to be clear, opposing counsel talking about Bates, what has been Bates marked as 16?
That's correct.
Your Honor, we would object for multiple reasons to this document. First, that to a lack of foundation, this document, there's no witness here today that will be able to lay foundation proper to be able to enter it in under that exception. Second, we would object to hearsay as it is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. And finally, Your Honor, we would object that it violates Rule 403.
Response from the plaintiff?
Your Honor, as to the foundation element, all documents in this case, per Local Rules 42, have been authentic. So all the documents are authentic. We just need a witness to talk about how they know about this document. As far as the hearsay goes, per Federal Rule of Evidence 803-3, the vermins contained within the TRO request are an exception to the rule against hearsay. Under 803-3, the statements are a declarant's then existing mental state or plan, such as intent or plan. In this case, Lou Donaldson made these averments with the intent of getting a restraining order against the defendant. As far as 403, Your Honor, something per Federal Rules of Evidence 401, something is relevant if it has any tendency to make a fact of consequence more or less likely. Here, this TRO should not be excluded as it does not confuse a jury, and it goes to a claim of why we're here today. We're here because of a wrongful death suit. The TRO will show that the decedent had intent against the defendant, and it would show his frame of mind and why he wanted a temporary restraining order against the defendant.
Okay. And counsel, why is that important to your case? What's the relevance of that fact that you just mentioned?
Well, it makes the fact of consequence more or less likely that the defendant actually did kill the decedent in today's case. It signals that the decedent was apprehensive of the defendant's actions. It also signals that the decedent wanted to remain a distance away from the defendant. It signals that the decedent wanted to get a divorce and that the decedent claims that the defendant wanted to kill him.
Okay. And final reply from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Well, first, as to the hearsay, in order for it to come in under that exception, there would need to be foundation laid that this was a present sense impression or that this is how Mr. Donaldson felt at the time. However, Your Honor, we have no idea as to when Mr. Donaldson actually prepared this document, and as well as there are statements within this document that are referring to statements made by Ms. Baja well in the past and would not actually fall under that exception, even if Your Honor finds that some of the other statements do fall under 8033. Specifically, referring your attention to line 1, it's testifying to a statement that Ms. Baja has made in the past and therefore would not fall under 8033. As to the 403 objection, Your Honor, this document was submitted to the court and the court was made aware of these allegations and it was subsequently denied. Now, to allow the jury to hear the statements elicited within this document would only serve to prejudice the jury, Your Honor, and any probative value that might come from a denied order would be very small and thus would be substantially outweighed by the prejudicial effect.
Okay. Thank you, counsel, for your argument. I'm telling you, I'm leaning towards admitting it, but I want to hear the foundation that's laid by whatever witness the plaintiff plans on trying to get this in on. So I encourage the defense to object at that point when it's trying to be entered through whatever witness that may be.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any other substantive motions from the plaintiff?
Your Honor, that concludes our substantive motions.
And from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. So we do have a stipulation we'd like to make you aware of. Both parties have agreed to pre-admit the will into evidence for today's trial. That'll be marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1.
Okay.
And then we do have 2 motions for the defense when you're ready, Your Honor.
What?
So first, by brief way of background, Karen Baja was married to Lou Donaldson, the decedent, and Mr. Donaldson left a will naming Karen the sole executor. He also left his real and personal property to Karen. No one else was included in this will, not even his son, Cam Donaldson. And we're here today because Cam Donaldson has brought a wrongful death suit against Karen, and also has claimed that she was a part of his disappearance back in August of 2012 and is seeking monetary compensation. Now, we do expect they'll allege this by accusing Karen of forging this will. Now, there is a second will, and the previous will was effective up until June 14, 2012. That will not be an exhibit in today's court. As for the prior will, we do ask to exclude that based on the best evidence rule 1002. When discussing a writing, you have to have the original or a copy. No one will be able to produce the prior will in court today. And furthermore, to allow the plaintiff or anyone else to discuss the content of the prior will, which there's no evidence it exists, would be a violation of the rule against hearsay. The prior will contains content which are out-of-court statements that will be used to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
In response from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. As for the best evidence rule objection, under Rule 1004, admissibility of other evidence of content, if all of the originals are lost or destroyed, as that is the contention in this case, a witness can speak about them if they have knowledge, even though we do not have the writing itself. And as well for the hearsay objection, it just goes to independent legal significance as it is a will. So we are not offering it for the truth per se.
And any reply from the defense?
Yes, the only thing, Your Honor, if there is discussion of the will, we still would, we're okay with the mention of the will, but if we could exclude the content at the very least, that's what we're moving for.
I'm going to deny that motion in limine. Clearly, defense has an opportunity to cross-examine on that and the lack of it being present in court, but I will allow the plaintiff through their witness who has seen the will to testify to what they believe the contents were on this will. And your second motion, Lemony?
Your Honor, we also had a motion to exclude the temporary restraining order. However, per your previous ruling, we'll hold that in abeyance.
Sounds good. Thank you, counsel. All right, with that, are we done with preliminary matters and we ready to proceed to opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Plaintiff, you may begin your opening statement whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, allow me to reposition in the well.
Sure.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. When all evidence points to one conclusion, well, that conclusion is usually the right one. If you follow the signs in this case, they will point to one conclusion: that someone had motive, plan, and they executed that plan. If you follow the signs in this case, they will point to one person's rage and greed and how that led to the death and disappearance of another. Members of the jury, my name is Brandon Rabel, and along with my co-counsel Summer Combs, we have the distinct honor of representing the plaintiff in today's case, Cam Donaldson, who's here on behalf of his dad's estate, Lou Donaldson. Now, Cam will get on the stand and tell you about how he followed the signs and how that led to his conclusion. But allow me to be the first to introduce you to Cam. Cam is a good son who's dedicated his entire life into following the footsteps of the man that he admires most, his dad, Lou. Now, Cam brought this case today because he's confident that all the signs point to one conclusion. But to understand what happened in today's case, we have to go back to a day about 20 years ago down a long, lonely stretch of Pioneer Road. Karen Beja slowly walks alongside this road. You see, Karen never had much. Growing up on the poor side of Pioneer didn't afford Karen many opportunities. And today, walking alongside this long, lonely road, Karen is hoping for a change. She's hoping that someone will come along and pull her out of her current situation. She's hoping that a Prince Charming will come and save her from a life marred by growing up poor. And someone does come along. And that someone is Lou Donaldson, someone that's 20 years Karen's senior. And when Lou comes, to Karen's surprise, he is just the Prince Charming she had been looking for. Lou has a good head on his shoulders. He's ambitious and rich. In Lou, Karen sees opportunities. From a life growing up poor that only offers stop sign after stop sign after stop sign, in Lou, all Karen sees are signs pointing to prosperity and financial security and a life beyond her wildest dreams. They meet that day and they talk and they get acquainted. And they talk the next day and the next day, and soon they fall in love. And they're married a short time after this meeting. Lou tells Karen that animals are his true passion. And he also tells her about wildlife, his nature preserve for lions and tigers and cougars and such. And when Karen hears this, she thinks if Lou likes it, well, I love it, because I'm willing to do whatever it takes to maintain this newfound lifestyle. A lifestyle that she grows accustomed to, a lifestyle created for her by Lou. And she does enjoy this lifestyle for about 10 years. But sometimes relationships grow cold and love fades and people decide to go their separate ways. Lou and Karen's marriage is no exception to this. Marital issues begin to compound. Tensions grow, and fights increase in frequency and intensity. Karen's marriage is now falling apart, and her soon-to-be ex-husband, Lou, just told her that he wants a divorce. And when she hears it, she sees everything that she's grown accustomed to over the last decade or so vanish. No more endless streams of money, No more lavish lifestyle. No more lions, tigers, and cougars. Oh my. And when she hears this, not unlike a cat backed into a corner, she lashes out and attacks and threatens to kill Lou. But this isn't a hollow threat. No, this is a promise. A promise that Lou believes. A promise so unsettling that Lou knows he has to do something to protect himself. So he requests a temporary restraining order against his soon-to-be ex-wife and tells his son, Cam, if anything happens to me, have the police looking at Karen because she's responsible. Well, members of the jury, something did happen to Lou. The defendant, Karen Beja, happened to Lou, and that's why we're here. We're here because after the defendant's deadly threat, no one has seen or heard from Lou since. We're here because his son Cam has brought a wrongful death claim against the defendant. And today we have the burden of proving to you by preponderance of the evidence that it's more likely than not that the defendant's actions intentionally and recklessly caused the death and disappearance of Lou Donaldson. Said another way, after you hear all the evidence in today's case and you put it on a scale, if the evidence against the defendant weighs more than the evidence for the defendant by just a feather's weight, well, you legally have to decide in Cam's favor. And this burden by preponderance of the evidence rests right here at our table the entire trial. And it's a burden that we gladly bear because, as you will see, all the signs in this case point to one conclusion. Now, earlier I talked how Cam would get on the stand and tell you about all the signs that he saw that led him to believe that the defendant was responsible for his dad's disappearance. Now, Cam will get on the stand and tell you about how he overheard multiple heated arguments between his dad and the defendant. He'll also tell you that the defendant claims to have a will that she claims came from Lou. And when he tells you about this will, I want you to pay particularly close attention to the facts and the circumstances surrounding this will. The evidence will show that this will was signed by Lou supposedly just 2 days after he requested a temporary restraining order against the defendant. And this will show that Lou is not the only one that signed it. Pay attention to who else signed this will. Now we'll offer our expert, Mr. Taylor Pride. He'll take the stand and tell you about his years of experience and how they formed his overall conclusion in this case. Listen carefully as he talks about the processes and the procedures that he used to make the determination of whether or not that was actually Lou's signature on the will. And members of the jury, he will come to a definitive determination. Now, we anticipate that the defense will call Mr. Chris Renard to the stand. Now, Chris Renard works for the same insurance company that paid out Lou's $5 million life insurance policy to the defendant. If Mr. Renard takes a stand, he won't be able to tell you definitively whether or not that was actually Lou's signature on the will. Yet, if he takes a stand, he'll tell you that he relied on this will and relied on that signature and coming to the determination to pay out the defendant $5 million of Lou's life insurance money. Now, the defendant may or may not take the stand, but through the evidence, she will attempt to convince you that on the night that her Prince Charming, Lou, disappeared, she was taking care of 2 newborn tiger cubs. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, she suddenly realized that these tiger cubs needed milk. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, she ran to the store. And she will try to convince you that at 3 o'clock in the morning, at some point between her house and the store, her car breaks down. And she calls her brother, not her husband, to come help her. The evidence will show that this brother works for the same police department that's currently investigating Lou's disappearance. And the only person here today that can vouch for this brother's whereabouts when he was helping his poor, helpless baby sister that night is the poor, helpless baby sister in this case, the defendant. Members of the jury, Cam doesn't care much for the defendant. In fact, if you ask him, he will openly tell you that he hates her. But can you blame Cam for hating somebody he holds responsible for his dad's death and disappearance. Cam followed the signs, and that led him to one conclusion. At the end of today's case, my co-counsel will stand before you and sum up all the evidence. And as you hear all the evidence today, I want you to continuously ask yourself one question. Is what I'm hearing more likely than not? Is it more likely that all these events, all the evidence are just random, chance occurrences? Or is it more likely that this evidence points to one person's motive, plan, and execution of that plan? Karen Beja knew that if Lou Donaldson left her, everything she had would disappear. So she made Lou disappear. And now she's hoping that you will suspend logic and reason and agree with her. But you have the power to send the defendant a clear sign, letting her know that the gig is up and enough is enough. You have the power to reclaim Lou Donaldson's memory and legacy by fighting for his son, Cam Donaldson. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, your opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? May it please the court. When something awful happens, it can be easy to deny the truth in order to avoid the pain and the heartache that comes with it. But members of the jury, no matter how hard or how painful it might be, there comes a day when we must accept the truth. For Cam Donaldson, today, well, today is that day. Now you might be wondering, what do I mean by that? Well, in order to understand, we have to go back to the beginning. You see, 20 years ago, our client, Ms. Karen Beja, stranded on the side of the road, hitchhiking, desperate for a ride, watching car after car pass her by. Just when she's about to give up, a car pulls off to the side of the road. A car she has no idea will change her life. You see, that car, it's carrying her future husband, a man she will fall head over heels for, a man she'll build a life with, a man named Lou Donaldson. But there's a problem. He's married. He's 20 years older than her. He's got a family. Karen was ashamed, but the connection they had was undeniable. Lou felt the same way. So he left his wife and he married her. Now, things were tough for Karen in the beginning. His family didn't accept her. They treated her like an outsider. They hated her. Still, their marriage was great for nearly a decade, until it wasn't. Karen loved her husband, but he was not a perfect man. Even after his second marriage, his wandering eye remained. You'll hear that Karen wasn't Lou's last mistress, that he had another down in Costa Rica. Members of the jury, Lou told Karen that he wanted to leave her, that he wanted a divorce. She was devastated, heartbroken. But members of the jury, you'll learn that there was one person who couldn't have been happier. That person was Cam Donaldson. Lou was Cam's father. Cam worked for his father for 20 years as an assistant at the animal sanctuary. He knew everything about the business. He scheduled the meetings, wrote the checks, answered the phones, ordered the supplies, ran the books. Cam did everything for the business that he dreamed would be his one day. But those dreams, well, they came crashing down in August of 2012. You see, to Cam's surprise, when Lou disappeared, the truth came out. Truth that to this day, Cam just doesn't want to accept. You'll learn that Lou chose to leave everything to Karen, including that business Cam loved so much. The business would never be his. The truth can be hard to accept. Pain, grief, anger, it can blind us. It can create stories that never happened. We expect today you'll see that for Cam Donaldson, it did just that. It created a story of signs pointing every which way except the truth. That his father left him nothing. Members of the jury, that's why you're here today. You're here because Cam, he can't accept the truth. And so he sued Karen. He sued Karen for something called wrongful death. Now, the judge is going to instruct you on this after the trial, but I want to take a second to break it down. That means that they're going to have to get up here and prove that Lou is dead. But that's not all, members of the jury. They're going to have to get up here and prove to you that Karen intentionally killed Lou. Not that she had a motive, not that she was upset about the divorce. They have to get up here and prove to you that this woman killed her husband. Members of the jury, I submit to you that that is a claim the plaintiff simply cannot support. Because if they could, this would be a criminal trial. Those would be prosecutors. Members of the jury, even if somehow they convince you that Karen did the things that they claim, they still have to get up here and prove that if it weren't for those actions by Karen, that Cam would have gotten everything. But that's just not what the evidence will show here today. It's not what the evidence will prove. And members of the jury, it's not enough for them to get up here and to say it to you. They have to prove it. Now, in order to meet their burden, the plaintiff's going to call a few witnesses here today. You're going to hear from the plaintiff. Cam Donaldson's going to take the stand, and to be honest with you, it's probably going to be pretty difficult for him. We expect that he's going to get up here and he's going to tell you about his father. I want you to pay attention closely, because while we expect he's going to tell you how much he loved his dad, you just might hear more about how much he hates Karen. That he thinks Karen broke up his parents' marriage. That he thinks Karen stole the sanctuary from him. Now you're going to hear that Cam didn't do anything about his father's disappearance for almost 5 years. That it was only about a month before his father's life insurance policy was set to pay $5 million to Karen. That it was only then that he hired a private investigator named Taylor Pride. Now, Mr. Pride is going to take the stand here today, and we fully expect that he's going to tell you that every story, every theory, every accusation that Cam makes is true. But I want you to listen closely, because we expect that Mr. Pride's going to have to admit to you that the police, well, they never found a body. They never found a murder weapon. They never even named Karen as a suspect. More truths that Cam just refuses to accept. Members of the jury, the judge is going to instruct you that we as the defense bear no burden in today's case. We have no obligation to put a single witness on the stand or enter a single piece of evidence here today. But we're going to. We're going to shed light on the truth in this case. You're going to hear from Karen. She's going to tell you all about her husband and their marriage, about how they built an animal sanctuary together, and how for nearly a decade, things were great. But she's going to tell you about the not so great parts too. About how Lou would take off for days on end without telling her that he was having an affair. But she's going to tell you that through it all, she was determined to make it work because she loved him. Now, members of the jury, when the insurance company was set to pay out that $5 million policy, the CEO himself brought in Chris Renard to do a full investigation. He's going to take the stand, and it was his job to find a reason to deny paying out that money. You're going to hear that after 5 weeks of doing nothing but investigating Lou's disappearance, well, they simply couldn't find enough evidence to deny the truth. And so they paid out every cent of that policy. Members of the jury, throughout today's trial, I want you to ask yourself, what is the truth here? Where is Lou? Why does Cam really blame Karen? Members of the jury, we expect that at the end of trial here today, you'll see that the plaintiff, well, they just can't answer those questions, or they just don't want to. Because the truth, it's hard to accept. At the end of trial here today, after you've heard all the testimony and seen all the evidence, we believe you'll see that the plaintiff has just left too many unanswered questions, too many what ifs. Because of that, at the end of trial, Ms. Reed is going to come before you and ask, just like I'm asking you now, find Karen not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Plaintiff, you may call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff's call Cam Donaldson to the stand. Good evening, Cam. Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cam Donaldson.
And Cam, what brings you here today?
I'm here because I want justice for my father.
Now, we'll talk about that justice you seek in just a minute, but I want to let the jury know a little bit about your father. So what does your father do for a living?
My father was the owner of Wild Wild Life. It's a big cat emporium, but before that, he sold used cars to make money so that he could open that business one day.
Now, when did your father open Wild Wild Life?
It would have been 20 years before 2012, so about 1992.
And Cam, did you also work at Wild Wild Life?
I did, yes, for that entire time, for those 20 years.
Could you explain what you did at Wild Wild Life?
Dad joked that I knew more about the business than he did. I ran the books. I made sure that all of our insurance documents were in order. I made sure that all of the cats had their registration. If you can think of it, I was doing it.
Now, Cam, how do you know the defendant in today's case, Karen Beja?
After my parents divorced, my father married Karen.
And you mentioned you worked at Wild Wild Life. Did Karen also work at Wild Wild Life?
She did, but I was never really sure what she did there.
Cam, now you brought this suit against Karen today. How do you feel? What is your attitude towards Karen?
Honestly, I hate her.
Now, hate, that's a pretty strong word. Did you always feel this way towards Karen?
I never really liked Karen, but I really started to hate her once I started piecing together the timing of things the summer my father disappeared.
Now, what did this timing indicate to you?
There was just a lot of suspicious events that happened close together.
Now, Cam, would it assist your testimony here to make use of a whiteboard to explain the timing of events that happened before your father disappeared?
I believe it would, yes.
Your Honor, permission for the witness to step down and make use of a whiteboard to explain his testimony.
That's granted.
Now, Cam, you just said that the timing of events that led to your father's disappearance is what made you suspicious of Karen. Could you depict the timeline on the whiteboard, please?
Absolutely. So on this far side, I'm going to start with the first event, and then I'm going to draw a line across with an arrow at the other end.
Cam, what's the first event that happened on your timeline?
The first thing that I can think of was an argument that Karen had with my father in which Karen threatened to kill my dad.
Could you mark that on the whiteboard, please?
I can.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the basis?
Speculation, Your Honor.
Response, counsel?
Your Honor, this is not speculation. If the witness is allowed to proceed, he will tell you what he personally heard during this argument and that he personally witnessed it. There's nothing speculative about what the witness is about to testify to.
All right. Any reply from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. I think my mic cut out a little bit, but I also said there's hearsay. There's 2 layers to that, if I may be heard.
Yeah, go ahead. What are the 2 layers of hearsay?
So the first layer of hearsay, anything that was said between Karen and Lou or Karen and Cam, I'm not objecting to that. But anything that was said from Lou to Cam Donaldson is an out-of-court statement, and Lou is not a party opponent in this case.
So, plaintiff, what's your response to just the 1 level of hearsay that she is objecting to?
Your Honor, I believe she's objecting to Lou's statement. If we're allowed to proceed on this testimony, this statement is considered an excited utterance because it was made during or immediately following the event that made him make this statement. If the witness is allowed to continue, he'll explain why his dad made this statement and how his dad was under the pressure of a certain event that caused him to make this statement.
All right. Well, given that, counsel, I'd ask that you lay that foundation for excited utterance before he testifies to it. And counsel, if you still believe there's an objection, go ahead and make it at that time.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Cam, what happened during this first fight you just testified to?
During the first fight, my father told Karen that he wanted a divorce. And then after that, Karen threatened to kill my dad.
Could you mark the date of that first fight on the whiteboard, please?
I can. So above the line, I'm putting first fight. And below the line, I'm putting June.
Cam, where were you at during this first fight?
I was in my my office at Wild Wildlife.
And after you heard this fight, what happened after?
I saw Karen storm down the hall, and then nothing really happened after that.
Cam, what's the next event on the timeline?
The next thing that stood out to me when I was looking back over stuff for today was when my dad took out the temporary restraining order against Karen on August 12th.
Cam, could you mark that on the whiteboard, please?
Yes. And like I said, I just misspoke. That was on June 12th. I'm going to put June 12 below the line. And above the line, I'm putting TRO for temporary restraining order.
Your Honor, permission to constructively approach?
The witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may.
Your Honor, I'm constructively showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as Bates Exhibit 16. Cam, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as Bates Exhibit 16. What is this?
This is the temporary restraining order that my father attempted to take out against Karen.
And Cam, have you seen this document before?
I have. I saw it in preparation for my testimony today.
And Cam, will this document help in your testimony here today?
I believe that it will, yes.
And Cam, is this document in the same or substantially the same condition it was in when you first saw this document?
Yes, sir, it is.
Your Honor, we now offer what's been previously marked as Bates Exhibit 16 into evidence.
Objection, Ms. Reed?
Yes, hearsay once again.
And this is the under the same basis that we had in the motions eliminate?
Yes, this is the same basis. And also the restraining order, Lou Donaldson still told Cam about this. So this is still an out of court statement as well. And it's same for the pretrial motion as well, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Go ahead.
This document per local rule 42 has been authenticated already. This document is from this very court. Also to the hearsay and hearsay objection for the first element, it is an excited utterance because he made this document under the impression of the statement, under the impression of the fight that Cam just witnessed. And the hearsay within hearsay objection is an exception because it's an opposing party statement per Federal Rule of Evidence 801. The other objections for hearsay, there's an exception to that too, then existing mental state or plan. Lou's statements in this document, I am seeking a divorce from Cam, or I don't feel, or Karen, I don't feel safe around Karen, indicate that he wanted to make this restraining order. It shows his plan. In addition, like I said previously, this document is from this very court.
Okay. And final reply from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. This is still an out of court statement. There's no foundation about when it was written, and we also don't know when it was written. Was it during, right after, or sometime later? There's still no foundation of how that's been laid.
Okay. I'm going to admit this exhibit. I think given that it is a court document and then also pursuant to, I guess, the authentication rules of this tournament. As far as the hearsay, I think the statements from the defendant would be under 801D2. I don't necessarily agree with the excited utterance exception, but I do find persuasive the 8033 statement of plan by Mr. Donaldson seeking to get a restraining order. So I will admit this exhibit. Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. It's admitted, and this is exhibit what?
This is Plaintiff's Exhibit 1.
Okay.
Excuse me, Your Honor, this is Plaintiff's Exhibit 2. Your Honor, permission to share my screen with the jury?
Granted.
Your Honor, I'm seeming to have some technical difficulty sharing my screen with the jury.
So is it on my end? I think it should be allowed, but
Your Honor, I request that we pause the time until we get the technology figured out.
Can you tell me, is it not allowing you to share? What's the issue, so I can kind of troubleshoot if I need to?
I'm clicking the share screen button, Your Honor, and it's not changing my screen.
It looks like sharing's authorized, at least from my point of view, which I'm the host. I'm not sure if you can try it again, maybe.
I'll try one more time, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor, it's not allowing me to share my screen. For this exhibit, could we constructively assume that the TRO was shared with the jury?
Yes, you may.
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, I know there's a, I don't have it in front of me, but I know there's an email for the tech person. And I think we can quickly shoot them an email if you have either your co-counsel or one of the witnesses that you have that's not participating in this direct to shoot that an email about that trouble, and they may be able to help you out.
Yes, Your Honor. I'll have my co-counsel send the email.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I believe that I'm able to share my screen and I could pull up the TRO for the time being, if that's okay with Your Honor.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll do that.
All right, Cam, what did this TRO that your dad requested indicate to you?
It indicated to me that my father didn't feel safe around Karen, that Karen had threatened him, and that my dad was seeking a divorce from Karen.
And why did that indicate that to you, Cam?
And that's what my dad put on this TRO. So, I mean, that's what he seemed to want to me.
Now, after your dad submitted this TRO request, what happened?
Well, that TRO request was denied, but a couple of days later, my father apparently signed this new will.
Could you mark on the whiteboard the date your father signed this new will?
That was on June 14th, so I'm writing that below the line. And above the line, I'm putting new will.
Cam, what, if anything, did the timing of the new will and the TRO indicate to you?
Well, it's really what the new will did in relation to the TRO that was significant to me.
How so?
Well, the new will gave everything to Karen, and my dad had just tried to take out a temporary restraining order against Karen. It just didn't make any sense to me.
Okay, Cam, what happened after this new will?
Nothing really happened until early August.
Could you mark that on the whiteboard, please? And Cam, while you're marking that, what happened in early August?
In early August is when Karen and my father had another shouting match.
Now, we talked earlier about the first argument that your father had with Karen. What happened in this argument?
The second argument, I heard my dad tell Karen that he wanted to get a divorce. And then I saw Karen storm down the hall, and that's when my dad came into my office.
And Cam, what happened after your dad came to your office?
He was white in the face. He was sweating. He looked terrified to me, and he told me that if anything should happen to him, that we should look at Karen.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Overruled.
Now, Cam, could you mark the fight down on the whiteboard, please?
Absolutely. Above the line, I'm going to put second fight.
Your Honor, permission to unshare the restraining order?
Yes, you may take it down.
Cam, what happened after the second fight?
After the second fight, on August 17th, was the last time that I saw my dad.
Could you mark that down on the whiteboard, please?
I can. Below the line, I've put August 17th. And above the line, I'm putting last time I saw dad.
Cam, what was going on the last time you saw your dad?
We were closing up Wild Wild Life for the day. We were just packing everything up, getting ready to go. My dad and I had a quick conversation about weekend plans. He invited me over for dinner on Sunday night, and he said that if he didn't see me then he'd see me on Monday.
Cam, what did you make of this invitation?
To me, it indicated that my dad didn't have any plans to go anywhere that weekend.
And why did it indicate that to you, Cam?
My dad always told me when he was going out of town. I can't remember a single time that he didn't.
Cam, what happened next?
After that was when my dad was declared missing on August 18th.
Could you please mark that down on the whiteboard?
Okay.
So the last time you saw your dad was August 17th, and he was declared missing on the 18th. What happened after that?
So after that is when Karen started to take over the business.
Cam, could you mark down the day The day she took over the business.
That was on August 19th. Above the line, I put Karen took over WWL, Wild Wildlife.
Now, Cam, you said the last day you saw your dad was on the 17th of August. Did you do anything to help locate your father?
Yes, I did, but unfortunately not until about 5 years later.
Could you mark that down on the whiteboard, the date, please?
I'm going to draw a line here. And on this side, all of these dates are going to be 2012. And all of these dates are going to be 2017. And it was in early June of 2017 that I hired a private investigator to look into my dad's disappearance. But June. Above the line, I put hired PI.
Now, Cam, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 5 years about since your dad disappeared. Why did it take you 5 years to hire a private investigator?
Honestly, I had faith in the police department here that they were going to be conducting an investigation, but as time went on and nothing was being put out about anything relating to my dad's disappearance, I lost hope and decided that if I wanted justice for him, I had to take matters into my own hands.
Cam, did anything else happen in 2017?
Not that I can think of, no.
Cam, does this whiteboard have all the events that you think that led to your dad's disappearance?
Yes, I believe so.
Your Honor, permission to preserve this exhibit for further testimony and closing arguments?
That is granted.
Permission for the witness to retake the stand?
You may.
Now, Cam, you just told us about a will that gives Karen everything. So I want to ask you, what does Karen have according to this will?
Well, she has my dad's business in selling airplanes. She has Wild Wildlife. She also has a $5 million life insurance payout.
Cam, what do you have?
Nothing from my dad's estate or the life insurance policy.
Now, Cam, we talked about the events leading up to your dad's disappearance, but I just wanted to ask you, how are you doing? How has it been since your dad disappeared?
It's been really tough for me. My dad was my best friend, the person that I would ask before I made any sort of major decisions in my life. And some days are better than others, but it's been really tough without him.
No further questions.
Counsel? Defense? Your cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Cam, you and your father are very close, right?
Yes, I believe we were.
You actually worked together.
Yes, for 20 years.
And you worked at the animal sanctuary with your father, like you said, for 20 years, right?
That's right, since 1992.
You had a lot of responsibilities there.
I did, yes.
You managed the books,
Yep, did everything my dad asked me to do. Yep,
answered the phones,
I did.
even wrote the checks.
I did, yes.
That was a huge part of your life.
Yes, it was.
But you and your father, you weren't the only ones who worked there, right?
No, we had other people that would work there as well.
Your stepmom, Karen, she worked there.
She did, but again, I never really was sure what she did there.
And you met Karen a long time ago.
I met her, I think, in 2000 or 2001. It was whenever my dad got married to her.
And you met her because she was having an affair with your father, correct?
Objection, relevance.
Response, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. We're not offering the affair for the truth. What we are trying to establish is the plaintiff's view of my client, as well as the resentment that has built up over the years.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, something is relevant pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 401 if it has any tendency to make a fact of consequence more or less likely than it would be without this evidence. The fact that if Karen and the decedent Lou had an affair has no tendency to make a fact of consequence more or less likely than it would be without it. We're here for a wrongful death suit. I'm not sure how an affair goes to prove or disprove that Karen acted intentionally or recklessly in causing the death or disappearance of Lou Donaldson.
I think given the way that defense structured that question, it was about Mr. Donaldson, or Cam Donaldson, that is, reaction to that and whether there's any potential bias because of that. So I'm going to deny the motion or the objection. You may continue, Ms. Reed.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that again, Cam. You met Karen because she was having an affair with your father, correct?
No,
No.
I'm not aware of any affair between my father and Karen.
But your father left you and your mother to go marry Karen, right?
No, my father and my mother raised me together.
But Cam, once your father married Karen, they didn't live in your house anymore, correct?
No, they didn't.
And once Karen and your father got married, they started the animal sanctuary together.
No, that's not correct. My father started the animal sanctuary in 1992.
Karen was your father's business partner.
No, Karen was not my father's business partner.
Fair to say she was the face of the sanctuary?
Possibly. I know she did a bunch of stuff like that, but again, I never really was sure what she did there.
But you were just always your father's assistant, right, Cam?
That's right. I mean, I ran everything in the background.
And Lou, he kept a box at the office, correct?
The lockbox? Yes. I kept that lockbox in my desk.
And Lou used to store papers in that box, correct?
I stored papers in that box as well as my father, yeah.
So that's a yes, correct?
Yeah, but it wasn't just my dad.
But you had access to that box.
I did. We kept all of the important documents for the sanctuary there, all of the insurance information, all of that.
And things like the will.
Yes, that was in there as well.
And you've looked inside that box?
I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, I looked at inside it then, yes.
Okay. And this was also the box that you claimed that you've seen your father's other will before, correct?
No, that was where he kept his only will.
So if Lou kept things in the box like the will, you can't tell us the last time you looked in that box, correct?
It would have been sometime around the last day I was there, honestly. Karen fired me and I wasn't able to look in it after that.
But you didn't look in that box every day.
No, I mean, there wasn't really a need to look in that box every day.
Or even every week.
It depended upon what we had going on, but for the most part, no.
So you just told us a moment ago that Lou was able to put things in that box, correct?
Yes, but usually we were in there at the same time. I don't know that my dad had a key to it. I think I was the only one that had a key, but I don't remember if he did or not.
So if Lou could put things in the box or he kept important things, you're telling me or testifying now that you don't know if he had access to that box?
Right. Usually my dad would come in and ask me if he wanted to use that box for anything, because I kept it in my desk, in my drawer, in my office. So.
But he could put things in the box.
Right, but I don't know that he had a key.
But he could put things in, correct?
Right.
I'm sorry, counsel, I didn't hear your objection.
Objection, Your Honor. It was asked and answered.
I'm going to overrule.
And Cam, he could take things out of the box as well.
If he had a key, yes. But again, I'm not aware that he had a key.
And on August 19th, in your testimony, you said that you found Karen at their office, correct?
At the Wild Wildlife offices, yes.
And you said that she was running away with a box. Isn't that right?
She had that lockbox with her, yes.
But on August 19, 2012, you didn't see what was in that box.
No, I mean, I knew it was in the box, but I didn't look in it that day, no.
Because Karen never opened it that day in front of you, correct?
That's right. I'm not aware that she had a key either.
And Cam, on the next day, August 20th, 2012, Karen started running the sanctuary, correct?
Yes.
And she was in charge.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
If she owned the sanctuary, she was in charge, correct?
Karen does not own the sanctuary.
But she took it over on August 20th, isn't that right?
That's right. She started acting like the manager or the owner, but she never was the owner.
And she fired you.
She did, yes.
You had just lost your job of 20 years.
I had, yes.
Fair to say that would make you upset, right?
I mean, I got a lot of experience from it. I don't know if that I was that upset. I mean, my dad wasn't around anymore, and it was kind of just, I was dealing with that at the time.
So Cam, your testimony is after having a job for 20 years that you loved, you weren't upset that you got fired?
Again, my dad had just disappeared. I was kind of more concerned with that at the time.
And then the will. We saw that in evidence. Lou didn't leave anything to your mom, right?
To my mom, no.
Lou didn't leave anything to you.
That's correct. And this new will that she's come up with after the fact, yes, that's correct.
Instead, everything went to Karen, his wife, right?
That's what, that's what that will says, yeah.
You were upset.
I mean, I think that will is forged, so of course I was upset.
You were angry.
Yes.
And then the life insurance policy, you knew about that, right?
Yes, I did.
Lou didn't leave anything to your mom.
Objection, best evidence.
Overruled.
Lou didn't leave anything to you either, right, Cam?
That's correct, yes.
Instead, everything went to Karen.
Yes, I believe that's what happened with the life insurance, yes.
$5 million.
That's correct.
And then once you found out about the will and the life insurance policy, you filed the suit.
Yes, I did.
You're seeking ownership of the sanctuary.
I am.
You're seeking proceeds from the life insurance policy.
I am.
And the police, they never arrested Karen.
Not that I'm aware of.
You're upset they didn't arrest her.
I don't think the police have done a good job investigating my dad's disappearance, if that's what you're asking.
So that's a yes to my question.
I'm upset that the police didn't do a very good job. We hadn't heard anything from them in 5 years. I mean, absolutely nothing.
Fair to say that you don't like Karen?
Objection.
No.
Overruled.
I'll ask that again, Cam. Fair to say you don't like Karen?
No, definitely not. I don't like Karen, especially after the timing of things when my dad disappeared.
In fact, you admit you hate Karen.
I do now, yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Redirect examination.
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Donaldson, you may be excused.
Thank you.
Plaintiff, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, may I take a few moments just to go back into the courtroom?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Your Honor, for giving me those few moments. At this time, we call Investigator Taylor Pride to the stand. Good afternoon, Investigator Pride. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yeah, hi, my name is Taylor Pride.
And Investigator Pride, what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm a private investigator and a forensic document analyst, and I currently own my own practice.
Before we get into more details about your career, could you tell us why you're here today?
Yeah, I was here because I was hired by Mr. Cam Donaldson in 2017 to investigate Lou Donaldson's disappearance and to analyze the validity of the last will and testament that's at issue in this case.
Were you able to reach an opinion on the validity of the will and Lou's disappearance?
Yes, I was to both.
Okay, before we get into those opinions, I do want to talk to you about your background. Could you tell us what you did before you became a private investigator?
Yeah, I was a police department here at the Pioneer Police Department. I started as a patrol officer, and in 2000, I was promoted to a detective, where I served for 16 years.
What did you do as a detective?
I oversaw all types of investigations. That would be like gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, drafting documents, and whatever else a police officer has to do to work a case.
What are some types of cases that you worked on as a detective?
I worked on a variety of cases, anything from like petty theft to missing persons to murder. It just depended on, what was happening here in town at the time and what I got assigned to.
Were there any specific types of cases that you tended to focus on while you were a detective?
Yeah, there were. I spent 6 years in the economic crimes unit, and in that unit, my primary focus was investigating forgeries.
What are some types of forgeries that you worked with?
Oh man, all types of forgeries. Pretty common one would be like a contractual forgery. Wills is something that we looked at fairly often. Anytime somebody would sign a document with a legal implication that has a potential to be misused. So all types of different stuff.
Did you have any specialized training that you had to go through so you could work with forgeries in the economic crime unit?
Absolutely. I attended a seminar that was held by the American Association of Handwriting Analysts. And in that seminar, I learned how to analyze documents and compare handwriting.
After that seminar, did you have to complete anything else?
Yes, I took a 4-phase assessment and to earn my certification in handwriting analysis and forensic document examination.
What happened when you finished that assessment?
Well, after I finished, I was certified in handwriting analysis and forensic document examination, and that's a certification I still hold today.
What do you do now to stay proficient in your forensic document examination and your handwriting analysis?
Well, I take annual training courses. I read any current literature, any updates to the science or to my field. And I have to recertify every 4 years in order to maintain that certification. But more importantly, I'm working these types of cases on a daily basis in my private practice. It's something that I'm very familiar with.
And have you ever testified in any other case besides today regarding your handwriting analysis and forensic document examination skills?
Yes, I've been called as an expert witness approximately 15 times. I've worked in civil cases, criminal cases, for the prosecution, the plaintiff, the defense. Wherever I get hired is wherever I go.
Well, focusing on this case, what are some materials that you reviewed during your investigation?
Yeah, during my investigation, I looked at the circumstances surrounding Mr. Donaldson's disappearance, and I reviewed the will that Ms. Baja brought forward. I looked at Mr. Donaldson's driver's license and a temporary restraining order that was filed with the courts.
And when you came to your conclusion after you reviewed all of those materials, did you apply your skills as a detective and your handwriting analysis and forensic document examination experiences, certifications, and methods and apply those to the facts of this case?
Of course, absolutely.
And are those methods widely used, accepted, and relied upon in your field?
Yes, they are.
And will the conclusion that you reached today help the jury in their determination today?
Yeah, it should. I sure hope so.
Your Honor, at this time, we tender Taylor Pride as an expert in handwriting analysis, forensic document examination, and forensic investigation.
Any voir dire or objection, Mr. Esposito?
The defense has no objection, Your Honor.
All right, so tendered.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Investigator Pride, you said that you had an opinion in this case. What is that opinion?
Yeah, based off everything I reviewed, it is my professional opinion that the defendant, or that the will, was forged, and that the defendant, Ms. Baja, is responsible for Mr. Donaldson's disappearance.
Before we get into the validity of that will, I want to talk to you about Lou's disappearance. When you started your investigation of his disappearance, what's one of the first things that you found?
Yeah, one of the first things that I found is that Mr. Donaldson wanted a divorce for Ms. Baja, and he actually tried to get a temporary restraining order against her and filed that with the courts.
And when you reviewed that temporary restraining order request, what did you find?
Well, it confirmed that Mr. Donaldson did, in fact, want a divorce from his then wife, and that Ms. Baja had threatened to kill him.
And how did this review of the temporary restraining order request factor into your conclusion?
Well, it factored into my conclusion because I found that it just wasn't likely that Mr. Donaldson would want a divorce, that he would then file a temporary restraining order against Ms. Baja, and then 2 days later purport to sign a will giving her all of his assets and estate, and that was certainly concerning.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation as to Mr. Donaldson's desires.
Response, counsel.
Your Honor, this is an expert witness, and he has been tendered in forensic investigations. It is his job to speculate and to try to come to a conclusion about reviewing all of these materials that he has stated that he has reviewed.
Any reply?
Briefly, Your Honor, there's no objection to this witness talking about what Mr. Donaldson actually said, but this witness can't speak to what Mr. Donaldson actually desired. He can only testify to what Mr. Donaldson may have written on that restraining order.
All right. I'm going to allow for a limited purpose, and that limited purpose is if the facts of this case and Mr. Pride's conclusion impacted why he determined that this signature was a forgery, he can opine on that as it applies to that. What he cannot opine to is just a general belief that he would not have done this otherwise. So with that constructive limiting instruction, I will allow it, assuming that he did rely on this in coming to his conclusion.
Thank
Yes,
you. Okay, Investigator Pride, let's transition and talk about that will that you reviewed. When you analyzed the will, what did you find?
Yeah, based on my analysis of the will, there were two things that I found. First was that the document, the will itself, was suspicious. Specifically, some language in there was suspicious. And I also determined and found that the signature was in fact forged.
What is the language in the will that you thought was suspicious?
Yeah, as a detective and someone working in the economic crimes unit, I've looked at hundreds of wills in my profession, and there was very unique language in Lou Donaldson's will that referenced die or disappear, and I had never seen that language before, so that was certainly, caused me concern.
Why was the phrase "or disappear" so suspicious?
Well, I'm sure counsel, wills are made for when people die to dictate how their estate should be distributed. They're not made or generally used for disappearances. So that was just something that we had never seen. And, as an expert investigator, it caught my eye and knew I needed to look into it.
And you also said that the signature, you concluded that it was forged. How did you make that conclusion?
Yeah, I made that conclusion using a three-step forensic document analysis process to determine the validity of that signature.
What is that three-step process?
It's obtain, analyze, and compare. We want to obtain known samples of handwriting or signatures. We want to analyze, as an expert in my field, you want to analyze the separate signatures for any unique characteristics. And then we want to compare the known samples to the unknown sample or the sample that's in question. And that's the process that I followed today.
So in this process, what did you obtain in this case?
Yeah, I first obtained known samples of Mr. Lou Donaldson's handwriting. Specifically, I received his driver's license, which had his signature on it. And I also received the temporary restraining order, which had his signature on it. So those were my known samples that I was able to get.
And after you obtained those samples, what did you do to analyze them?
Yeah, I analyzed the two known samples for any unique characteristics such as shapes, curves, direction, embellishment, anything that I can see visually, as an expert, that what makes someone's handwriting unique. I was able to identify those characteristics and to compare them.
And after you analyzed these handwritings, what did you do?
Well, I compared the known samples of Mr. Donaldson's signatures to that of his purported signature on the alleged will. And I looked and I was looking to see whether there was any hesitation marks or strange marks or things that would indicate that this might be a forgery.
And when you use this three-step method, what did you find?
Well, the signature on the driver's license and the temporary restraining order, those were matched. Those were clearly written, in my expert opinion, by the same person. But the signature on the will did not match any of the known handwriting samples, and I concluded that it was a forgery.
Investigator Pride, would it assist you in your testimony to be able to show the jury how you walked through those steps to come to that conclusion by using a PowerPoint?
Yes, it would.
Your Honor, permission for the witness to share their screen.
That's granted.
All right. So the first thing I want to show you is I'm zooming in on the signatures from my known handwriting samples. That's going to be from the temporary restraining order and from the driver's license. And when I looked at these two samples, if you look at the L, for example, you can see that the L in the temporary restraining order and in the driver's license is very similar. I could also tell based on the flow and the styling of each signature that it was likely written in one fluid motion, which is how we normally sign things, without any hesitation or breaks or marks. So, using those processes, I saw that these were in fact written by the same person.
And how did you find that these two known signatures were different than the signature on the will?
Yeah, I can zoom in on the signature from the will and the temporary restraining order. So on top, again, we see the temporary restraining order signature of Mr. Donaldson. And at the bottom, we see the signature here in question, which comes from the last will and testament. And this signature was just had a plethora of issues, retouching, hesitation, what appears to be unnatural handwriting. For example, if we look at this D and then we look at the D in the known handwriting sample, you see these unique kind of dots. It almost looks like somebody may have started and stopped or went back and tried to, draw that D how they saw it. And then as we go through, we can see getting closer to the end, looking at this, what should be an O, that's just uniquely different between the two signatures. And I could tell that there was hesitation and this was unnatural. And I used that to conclude that this bottom signature was not Mr. Donaldson's signature.
So is that your professional opinion on the signature on the will?
Yes, based on my review, it is my professional opinion that this signature, the signature that is purported to be of Lou Donaldson, that he never signed it, that this is not his handwriting.
Thank you, Investigator Pride. Your Honor, permission for the witness to stop sharing the screen. Okay, Investigator Pride, I want to shift back to your investigation of Lou's disappearance. You testified earlier that you investigated the surrounding circumstances of his disappearance. What is something that you looked into?
Yeah, during my investigation into his disappearance, something that I looked into was all of Mr. Donaldson's financial records.
Why did you look into his financial records?
Well, I was given a date that Mr. Donaldson was last seen alive, and I wanted to see whether or not there was any financial activity after that date. That could indicate a variety of things to a trained investigator, one of which is that Mr. Donaldson could have still been alive.
Did you see any activity in these statements when you reviewed them?
No, absolutely not. I didn't see any financial activity after the date that Mr. Donaldson was reported missing.
So taking everything that you've talked about into consideration during your investigation, did all of the evidence and signs point you to one conclusion?
Yes, based on my investigation and in my expert opinion, all of the evidence and the signs did point to one conclusion, and that was that Karen Baja is responsible for the disappearance of Mr. Donaldson. I was able to come to that conclusion considering the impending divorce, the death threats, the temporary restraining order, the significance of the filing of those documents, that they only came 2 days apart, from a death threat and a temporary restraining order to a will that purported to give Ms. Baja $5 million. Using all of that, it is absolutely my opinion that Ms. Baja is responsible.
Thank you, Investigator Pride. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Combs. Mr. Esposito, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? Good evening, Mr. Pride. Now, Cam Donaldson hired you in July of 2017, isn't that right?
Yes, that sounds correct.
He paid you to collect some evidence, right?
He paid me to essentially, look into Lou's disappearance and to analyze the will, and he's sure that can be collecting evidence as part of that.
Right. He paid you to make a report, right?
Yes.
But Mr. Pride, he paid you to say that Karen killed Lou, didn't he?
No, he never paid me to say that Karen killed Lou. He paid me as an independent investigator to come in and to use my professional experience and judgment to render a decision. In my professional opinion, Karen is responsible for Lou Donaldson's disappearance, but that's not why I was paid.
Okay, Mr. Pride. Well, we'll get to what you did to earn your money here today, but first I want to talk a little bit about your background. You used to be a detective, right?
Yes, for 16 years.
So naturally, you know how important it is to conduct a thorough investigation, right?
Of course, yeah, I would agree.
You know how important it is to follow all the leads,
Yeah,
talk to any witnesses,
yes,
collect any evidence,
yes.
make sure that evidence is reliable.
Sure.
And all those things are important because they're necessary to make sure that your investigation's accurate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want a sound investigation, and some of the things you mentioned would contribute to that. Sure.
Right, you'd agree. It's very important to have an accurate investigation, right?
I would agree. Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about your investigation in this case. As you said, you were brought in by Cam in July 2017. At that time, you quickly became aware that you weren't the only one investigating Lou's disappearance, right?
Yes, that's true.
Right. The Pioneer County Sheriff's Office actually was also investigating.
Yes.
In fact, they had been investigating continuously for 5 years, right?
I mean, as far as I can tell, I'm not sure what investigative steps they took, but yeah, I was aware that they may have been looking into this.
We'll get to that, Mr. Pride, but they were investigating continuously for 5 years, right?
I'm not sure whether it was continuous, but yeah, generally I knew that they were looking into this.
Okay, Mr. Pride. Now, you didn't have access to their department, did you?
No,
You didn't have access to their resources.
no,
So you don't know what was in their files, do you?
no, of course not.
You don't know what leads they followed up on.
I don't know whether they did follow up on any leads, frankly.
Right. You don't know what evidence they collected, do you?
I don't know if they collected any evidence.
All right. In fact, Mr. Pride, they didn't tell you anything about their investigation, did they?
No.
Now, Mr. Pride, I want to talk about what you do know about that investigation. You know that they never charged Karen with a crime, right?
Yes, I do know that Karen has never been charged.
All right. You know that Karen has never been arrested, right?
Yep.
You know that the police never suspected foul play, right?
Which is absurd, but that's what I've heard.
Mr. Pride, I'm not asking if you think it's absurd. I'm asking that you know that they never suspected foul play, right?
Objection, Your Honor. The witness has answered this question.
Overruled.
Yeah, I know that they didn't suspect foul play, counsel, but that certainly doesn't mean that it was that's right. There was a lot of indicators here of foul play, which is concerning, and it should be concerning to the citizens of this state.
Directing back to my question, though, Mr. Pride, that's a yes. They never suspected foul play.
Yeah, no, it's just crazy.
Right. And Mr. Pride, you know they never even named Karen as a suspect, right? You know that.
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel has already asked the witness this question.
Overruled.
Yes, I do know that Karen was never formally named as a suspect, and again, that's concerning.
Okay, Mr. Pride. Well, we'll get to your opinions later. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about those samples that you talked about on direct examination, specifically the handwriting samples. Now, as you said, you know how to do proper handwriting analysis, right?
Well, I'm certified in handwriting analysis and document examination, so absolutely.
Right. You know the method you're supposed to use, right?
Yes.
And those methods are supposed to be followed because they make sure the analysis is accurate, right?
Of course.
Now, as you said, the first step is to obtain. Now, that means that you collect known samples from the signer, right?
Yes.
Now, it's important that those samples be accurate because they serve as the baseline, right?
I agree.
In fact, those samples will be compared and be the foundation of all your opinions on the signatures, right?
Yeah, certainly you couldn't render a decision without known samples.
Right. Now, in your report, Mr. Pride, you say that original samples, not photocopies, are the best samples, right?
Yeah, if it's possible, we would always want originals. I agree, but unfortunately, that's not always practical or possible. So we may have to use photocopies.
Right, but directing back to my question, Mr. Pride, originals and not photocopies are the best, right?
Yeah, if you have access to them, yes, they are.
Originals are the most reliable.
If you have access to it, yes, they are.
But yes, if you have access to originals, those are the most reliable, right, Mr. Pride?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in this case, you collected 3 samples to serve as your baseline, right?
Yes.
You collected the signature from the restraining order, right?
Yes.
You collected the signature from Lou's driver's license, right?
That's correct.
Now, to be clear, signatures on driver's licenses are copies, right?
Yes. Yeah, it wouldn't have been an original signature.
Right. It wasn't an original sample.
No, it wasn't.
And as you said before, original samples are the most reliable, right?
Yep. If we had access to them, we would have wanted the original. I agree.
Right, Mr. Pride. Now, the 3rd sample you collected was from a letter that Lou wrote to Cam. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Now, that sample was an original, wasn't it, Mr. Pride?
Yes.
Mr. Pride, you didn't use that signature in your analysis, did you?
No, I used the samples that I showed you today, but certainly, analyzing all the evidence that I had at hand, I was still able to render a decision.
Right, you used the copies, right?
Yes,
Not the original sample.
that's true.
And to be clear, you never compared that original sample to the signature on this document, did you?
No, but I did compare these 2 known samples to the forged signature.
Right, Mr. Pride, but I'm asking you specifically about the original sample. You didn't compare it to the will, did you?
No,
And you didn't include in your report any analysis comparing the 2 and how similar they might have been, did you?
no, I don't believe so.
You didn't actually include the signature itself in your report, did you?
No,
Mr. Pride, you didn't bring the signature with you here today to trial, did you?
I did not.
So, Mr. Pride, in court here today, there are only 2 people who have seen that original sample. Isn't that right?
Actually, I have no idea who's seen that original sample.
Well, you've seen it, right?
Yes.
And you know Cam Donaldson has seen it.
I don't know if Cam Donaldson has seen it. Maybe. Sure.
Mr. Pride, Cam Donaldson gave you the signature, did he not?
Yeah. So I guess Cam must have looked at it. I don't know for sure. I don't remember talking to Cam about whether or not he looked at this document. No.
Okay, Mr. Pride. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit. Lou owned airplanes, right?
Yes,
Lou bought and sold airplanes, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Now, you know that Lou didn't always properly register those airplanes, did he?
That's what I heard.
Right. And because he didn't properly register his airplanes, you can't be sure how many he actually owned, can you?
That's true. I don't know how many he owned.
Right. And you don't know where he kept his airplanes, do you?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Response to relevance, counsel.
Your Honor, the fact that we do not know how many airplanes Lou Donaldson had or where he kept them is extremely important to today's case because we do not actually know that Lou Donaldson is dead. And there will be testimony that he had a mistress in Costa Rica. And one of the possible theories here today is that Lou Donaldson was not killed and that he, in fact, took off on one of his airplanes.
Ms. Combs, response?
No response, Your Honor. Not at this time.
All right. That objection is overruled.
So, Mr. Pride, we don't know where he kept his airplanes, do we?
No.
And so because we don't know how many he had or where he kept them, we can't know for sure if one of those planes went missing on August 17th, 2012, can?
That's true.
Okay, now, Lou was a wealthy man, right?
Yeah, he was. Successful businessman.
He had a $5 million business,
Yes.
$5 million home.
I'm not sure how much his home is worth. Lou was definitely wealthy.
Okay, he had a $5 million life insurance policy, right?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned on direct examination that you looked into Lou's financial records, right?
I did.
Now, specifically, you looked at a bank statement of his, right?
I looked at all of Lou's financial records.
Right. Now you'd recognize the bank statement from his account if I showed it to you, wouldn't you?
I'm sure I would.
All right. Your Honor, permission to have the witness pull up what has been marked as Bates Exhibit 15?
That's granted.
All right. Mr. Pride, are you looking at Bates Exhibit 15?
Give me 1 second. I'm going to go find that. Sorry, I'm pulling it up now. Bates Exhibit 15. Okay, I see it.
All right. Now, this was the bank statement you used in your investigation, right?
Well, this was a bank statement I got, I believe, from your expert, Mr. Renard. But like I said, I looked at all of Lou's financial records.
Right. You're familiar with this document, aren't you?
Yes, vaguely.
Mr. Pride, you reviewed it during your investigation, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I reviewed your expert's report, which contained this statement. Yes.
This is fair and accurate representation of Lou's bank statement?
As best as I can tell, yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to enter what has been marked as Bates Exhibit 15 into evidence as Defense Exhibit A.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Your Honor, permission to publish this document to the jury through screen sharing?
That's granted.
Now, Mr. Pride, I want to direct your attention to the last two entries here on this bank statement. Starting with the second to last entry, it says that it was an ATM cash withdrawal for $140. Isn't that right?
That's what it says.
Right. And the date there is August 15th, 2012. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Okay. Now, directing your attention to the bottom entry there, that's a debit transaction for $940, right?
Yes.
And the date on that one is August 17th, 2012.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Pride, as you said before, it's very important for an investigation that your report be accurate, right?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Pride, in your report, you say that Lou Donaldson didn't spend a single cent after August 12th, 2012. Isn't that right?
Without looking at it, I'm not sure. I guess if August 12th is the date that Mr. Donaldson was reported missing, and yes, I think that's correct.
Well, actually, Mr. Pride, Lou Donaldson was not reported missing, but would you like me to refresh your memory by showing you your report?
Sure, you can refresh my memory.
I'd like you to pull up that if you have it in front of you.
Yep, again, just give me 1 sec. I'm pulling it up now. It's up.
All right, now I want to direct your attention to the last page of your report. That middle paragraph there that starts with, "I know Ms. Baja." Okay, on the third line, the very end of that sentence, it ends with, "And he did not spend a single cent after August 12th, 2012. Did I read that right?
Yes, like we just said, counsel, obviously, he didn't go missing until the 17th. So I think that would have been the more appropriate statement. The significance and the point is that from the day Mr. Donaldson was missing, he never spent another dollar. So the fact that he pulled out $140 that week absolutely had no bearing on my investigation.
Right, but directing to my question, Mr. Pride, it does say that in your report that he didn't spend a single cent after August 12th, right?
Yeah, that's what the report says.
Right, and you knew that you had up until trial today to correct any mistakes in here, right?
Well, I'm correcting it now. I'm telling you that after August 17th, he never spent a dollar. That was the significant date. August 12th was not significant.
Right, Mr. Pride, you're correcting now because as we just saw, that's not true, is it?
No, I guess it's not true that week he pulled out $140 in cash.
Now, Mr. Pride, in that bank account, he had a little under $100,000, right?
That's what it looks like.
Right. It's your testimony that was his only bank account, right?
To the best of my knowledge, but I looked at all of Lou's financial records.
Right, but when looking through his financial records, you only found one bank account, right?
I believe so.
All right. And it's your testimony to this jury, Mr. Pride, that a man worth $10 million had one bank account, right?
Yes.
It's your testimony the man who bought and sold airplanes as a hobby had one bank account with $100,000 in it, right?
That's the record you just showed me. Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about what you did when searching for those bank accounts. You can't tell the jury what banks you checked in with in Pioneer County, can you?
No, not right now. Not offhand. I can't.
You can't tell us because it's not in your report either, is it, Mr. Pride?
No.
You can't tell the jury which banks you checked with in Statesville, can you?
That's true. I can't.
You can't tell the jury which banks you checked with in Costa Rica, can you?
No.
Now, Mr. Pride, going to your Costa Rica investigation, you found that Mr. Donaldson had connections, people that he knew in Costa Rica, right?
Yeah, and I guess to be clear, out of all of the records that I ever found, I found no evidence that there was any of these other accounts. So that means, of course, that would explain why I can't name them. But yes, we also looked into this Costa Rica allegation.
Okay, Mr. Pride. Now, to be clear, you sent one employee to search in Costa Rica, right?
Yes.
You didn't send one employee to search an entire city, did you?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, you didn't send that one employee to search one city in Costa Rica, right?
No, generally to go to Costa Rica. I mean, the only evidence we had, or the only allegation that we've ever heard, was Costa Rica in general. So that's where we looked. If we would have had a city, that's where we would have been.
Right, Mr. Pride. You had one person search the entire country of Costa Rica.
Well, I think it's hard to agree to what you're saying. So I'm not sure that, that's an accurate statement that he physically searched. I sent one investigator to Costa Rica to look for any leads that would support any allegation that Mr. Donaldson was there, and he didn't find any. I mean, he wasn't sifting house by house looking for him.
Objection, Your Honor. Non-responsive.
Overruled. You can follow up with him, Mr. Esposito.
Very well, Your Honor. Mr. Pride, I just want to be clear. You sent one investigator to search in Costa Rica, and as you said, you didn't know exactly where in Costa Rica to look, right?
Yeah, I sent my investigator to look for any traces of evidence, and we didn't find any, not a single one.
Right, that one employee didn't find anything.
Yes, we as an organization, we didn't find any.
Now, as you said before, Cam hired you in July of 2017.
Yes.
Lou did not go missing until August of 2012, right?
Yes.
Right. And just to be clear, in mid-August of 2017, Lou's life insurance policy was set to pay $5 million to Karen, right?
I believe that's right.
Right. And Cam didn't call you a month after his dad went missing, did he?
No.
Didn't call you a year after?
No.
No, Cam's call came to you about 5 years after.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Overruled.
Yes, I was hired 5 years after he was reported missing.
And to be clear, just so the jury has that timeline, from mid-July when Cam called you to mid-August when Karen was set to receive $5 million, that means that it was about 3 to 6 weeks before that $5 million got paid to Karen. That it was only then that Cam called you, right?
Yes, Cam hired me in July 2017.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Redirect examination, Ms. Combs.
Just real quick, Your Honor. Investigator Pride, even though you didn't have all originals of Lou Donaldson's signatures, are photocopies just as reliable?
Yeah, photocopies are used all the time in this field. We often, we'd love to have originals. We often don't get originals. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the analysis or the ultimate conclusion is any different.
And Investigator Pride, when you spoke about your bank accounts in your report, what was the reason that you did not list the names of the bank, all of the banks that you?
Well, frankly, there was no evidence of any other bank accounts. So no, there was no reason to list things that, that it didn't exist. We only found evidence of the one bank account.
Sorry, were you objecting, Mr. Esposito?
Your Honor, we object to lack of foundation.
Overruled.
Investigator Pride, you can continue if you weren't done speaking.
No, I was just saying, that we, in looking at Mr. Donaldson's background, we looked at any of his financial records and we didn't find any evidence of any of these mystery banks, that could exist, I guess, in Costa Rica or anywhere else. We only found evidence of the one.
All right. Thank you, Investigator Pride. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Pride may step down. Plaintiff, do you have any other witnesses or evidence you want to present?
We do not have any more witnesses, Your Honor, but at this time, we do want to make sure that we publish all of our exhibits to the jury.
Okay. And for the record, those exhibits are 1 and 2, or am I missing one?
It's 1 is the will and number 2 is the temporary restraining order. Yes.
We will constructively publish those to the jury unless there's something else that you want to do with it within a witness or anything like that.
No, Your Honor, we can just constructively publish them.
All right.
We would
It will be
ask,
constructively published. Go ahead, Mr. Esposito.
Your Honor, my apologies. We would just ask that Defense Exhibit A also be constructively published to the jury.
Yes. Any other witnesses or evidence, Ms. Combs, or does the plaintiff rest?
The plaintiff rests at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. I show that it is 5:44. We will take a 10-minute recess. Let everyone kind of stand up, move their feet around. So we will begin at, let's go 5:55. And we will resume with the defense's case in chief.
Your Honor, before we go, may I have a quick just time check for the plaintiff's case?
Yes, if they have that calculated. Otherwise, we can do it when we take a recess.
Mm-hmm.
And Your Honor, the defense has a motion to make before the court. Would Your Honor like to make us to make that motion after the break?
Let's do it after the break.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. I will give you about 10 minutes. All right, if we can have all the advocates just put their video on just to make sure everyone's present before we start again. Now, Mr. Esposito, you asked for a time check. I did get a message from the scorekeepers. It says prosecution. It's the plaintiff has used 36 minutes and 22 seconds, meaning that they have 33 minutes and 38 seconds remaining. The defense has used 35 minutes and 52 seconds, meaning the defense has 34 minutes and 8 seconds remaining. Any questions on that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor. Just one quick question.
Yeah.
Will the timekeeper towards the end during closings be able to give us like a 1 minute warning?
Yes, I believe they should be doing that. I believe it's Mr. Renard and Mr. Pride are the two timekeepers for each side. So to both those witnesses, if you could, you can turn on your audio and say 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever your counsel is asking you to do. That's fine with me.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, we will recall the case and we will start with any motions from the defense or plaintiff at this time.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we move for judgment as a matter of law pursuant to Rule 50 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Your Honor, based on all the evidence that has been presented here today, in the light most favorable to the plaintiff, no reasonable jury could find in favor of Cam Donaldson. Your Honor, here today, we have not heard any evidence as to if Lou Donaldson was dead, how he might have died, when he died, where he died, or even who killed him. Your Honor, the plaintiff has not presented any concrete evidence here today that Karen Baja intentionally killed Lou Donaldson. Therefore, at this time, a judgment as a matter of law is appropriate.
And the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. In the light most favorable to the non-moving party, a reasonable jury could certainly find that the defendant either intentionally or recklessly caused the death of Lou Donaldson. We have presented evidence today through both of our witnesses of a series of suspicious events leading up to Lou Donaldson's disappearance, such as the fights, the death threat, the temporary restraining order request, and then the 2 days later, the will popping up. And then there were events that happened after Lou's disappearance. And these events give rise to the belief that the defendant, she wouldn't have acted in the ways that she would have if she didn't already know Lou wasn't coming back. And we understand that this is all circumstantial evidence. However, circumstantial evidence does hold the same weight in court as direct evidence. And because of that, a reasonable jury could certainly find, by looking at all of this circumstantial evidence, that all the evidence points to the one conclusion, that the defendant is responsible for the death of Lou Donaldson.
All right. Motion is denied. Defense, you may begin your case.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, defense calls Ms. Karen Baja to the stand. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name's Karen Baja.
Now, you've been sitting here throughout today's trial, and we've heard a lot of accusations. I just want to clear the air. Karen, did you kill your husband?
Absolutely not. I love Lou more than anything. I can't even believe that anyone would try to say that I hurt Lou. I had nothing to do with his disappearance.
Can you tell me how you and Lou met?
It's a funny story, actually. When I was younger, I was trying to catch a ride one night, and Lou was kind enough to offer me one. I was so lucky to have met him that night. I mean, if a stranger gave me a ride nowadays, things would have probably ended a lot differently. But I could tell from the moment that Lou said hello, he was the one for me.
And how did you know that he was the one?
From the moment that we met, he was helpful, caring, sweet. He was everything I hoped to find in a man.
Did everything go smoothly once you both met?
It was definitely a whirlwind romance. We fell in love very quickly and got married soon after. He was my knight in shining armor. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it really was like a fairy tale. didn't know it was possible to love someone that much.
Now, Karen, we heard Lou was married. Was he married when you met him?
He was.
Connection, relevance.
And Mr. Board, is this the same type of objection I think we had during the plaintiff's case in chief as far as the affair?
Yes, Your Honor. This is pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 403. If Your Honor finds this evidence relevant, I'm asking that this evidence be omitted because it's substantially more prejudicial than it is probative in this case.
Okay. I'm going to overrule the objection on the 4-3 grounds as well. Thank you, counsel.
He was.
Sorry, go ahead, Karen. You can finish what you were saying.
He was married when we met, and I'm not proud of that, but like I said, we laid eyes on each other and we just knew.
Did you meet his family at some point?